All right, hey, thanks for joining us again today. I sure appreciate your guys' support. Thanks for watching the videos. This episode's gonna be pretty special. Special to me and a lot of fun for me. I hope you guys can just enjoy. Today, we have a special guest on Bad Hombre Garage, and in fact, we're on location at my parents' house, actually. We're in my dad's shop. You can see behind me his 32 Ford, probably way back up on the wall, maybe some pictures of other hot rods. But this is what we're doing today. I got my dad with me. This is Mike. He's the guy that taught me everything I know about hot rods and cars and everything. And as you guys saw, if you watched the video where I asked for your questions, I showed some pictures of an old front engine dragster that he ran before I was even born, and then a couple of street rods that he built when I was growing up. But those are just primers. Those are just primers for you guys to ask some questions about what you wanted to hear from us, what you wanted to see, anything you wanted to talk about. And so here we are. So Dad, with that, you got anything before we get started in the questions?
Well, I just want to say thank you for having me, and I enjoy this, and I enjoy being around this stuff, and I just hope that you guys aren't too tough on me as far as the questions go.
That's good. Hey, while you guys are watching this, if you have questions for future episodes, don't be afraid, just put down there in the comments or things you want to hear more about, because hopefully we can sit down and do this again another time. So, all right, with that, you want to see some of the questions we had?
Yeah, let's see what you got. See if we can answer something, or
all right,
at least talk about a few things.
All right, so where we should start. So I jumped around a little bit with I put some on my YouTube. I put Instagram out there. If you guys aren't following my Instagram, Bad Hombre Garage, I try to post a lot of pictures of the projects we're doing. And anyway, I posted on there for you to ask questions. So I had a few there, and I had a few on my YouTube channel. So let's start with the YouTube channel questions, and we'll kind of work backwards on those. My most recent ones, and we'll kick this over to my dad. What's the craziest project you've ever done? A guy named Rick asked that question.
The craziest project. Crazy can mean a lot of things. I've just played around with a lot of hot rods over my lifetime here, and I can't really say there was anything real crazy. There was some that were built with some pretty tight schedules, time restraints. And if you watch any of these new programs now on TV, these guys are supposedly building a hot rod in 2 weeks. Well, if you ever got to see any of the behind the scenes stuff, they have people that come in there and actually do the work 24 hours a day. So I was never that tough. I did put in a lot of hours. I was involved in a hot rod that was a contract job that lasted 23 days. And in 23 days from the ground up, that was quite a project. It was a good challenge, but looking back on some of the pictures that have been posted on the YouTube or the Instagram, you'll see a picture of myself with a 55 Chevy. You can't even tell, the body's not setting on it yet, but there's a full cage, and it's a blown big block car. The whole front end, everything. We're talking ground up car, 23 days, and I was 11 pounds lighter after those 23 days.
That was the craziest. That was crazy, I think, on the timeline. I'll put a picture on here. We'll cut to a picture of my dad with that car here.
Anyway, it worked out well. The car ran well, but I don't recommend that for anybody, because that's a pretty hard schedule to stay on. But it was fun anyway. I can look back on it now and say that. Anyway, Rick, thanks for asking that question. nothing real crazy. Played around with a dragster, and there was times that I probably went a little faster than I expected, and there was a few exciting moments, but anyway, it was a fun time.
He says, you say crazy, and you can see behind us that, you know, he's got a blown Hemi in his 32 Ford behind us. So, you know, this isn't crazy, apparently, crazy enough to be considered that. I think that shows where your threshold is for crazy.
Well, it's not actually crazy, it's just fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, it can get a little bit crazy if you want it to, but it's just a fun thing to do. And but you got to respect it. You got to respect horsepower. But I have a little saying that too much horsepower still isn't enough.
I like that. I like that. Hey, so Rick asked one more question. What is your favorite car? And I'm curious about that one too. What do you have to say about that?
My favorite car, you know, you can't pin anybody down on that. Usually, what I just like to say in answer to that is, it's probably the next project that I'm working on.
I like that.
I get excited when I get a new project, and it's pretty easy for that excitement to wear off pretty quick when all the hard work starts. But the whole key to this thing is it's the journey, not the very end or the destination. So, you know, keep it fun. And I also have found that working on it almost on a day-to-day basis keeps it fun.
Yeah, sticking with it and just keep
That's
going.
right.
You get to see the progress done on it.
You know, it's hard to get started sometimes. There's a lot of projects that just get left. But the key to that is get out there and try to do something as often as you can. I know we all have time restraints, but if you go out there and want to turn a couple of bolts every day, it feeds on itself. Mm-hmm. It gets you more excited, and the ball just keeps on rolling. So keep that in mind. If you got a project that's been just sitting back, go out there and turn a few bolts on it, do a few things, and imagine what you're going to end up with. And it's going to help you out. It'll make you want to get out there.
Yeah.
It'll get to the point where you're in the house and you're thinking, I could be out there doing this instead of sitting here watching TV or doing nothing.
That's true. That's true. And I know at least I have been caught sitting inside my non-running heap of junk in the garage, like sitting in the driver's seat, just imagining. And it's kind of embarrassing when it happens, but that's true. You got to have that vision and kind of be able to picture yourself and see where that car is going to be.
Well, and you know, you always look forward to getting back to it when you keep imagining and deciding which direction you're going to go, because it'll help you out with acquiring more parts, deciding what you want to use on it, what you need to do. So you always have that vision, and you're out there searching and looking, and it keeps it exciting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, speaking of that, and I want to answer this one to start with initially. Andre, he's actually an old friend from, well, I consider him an old friend from back in the town I grew up in, but Andre Garza wrote, do you want to do up my 71 Chevelle SS? To which I'll say, first off, Andre, I didn't know you had a 71 Chevelle SS. Those are cool cars. Those are really, really good muscle cars. I like them. But I wanted to, before we were even sat down, I thought about that question a little bit, and just thinking about what my dad was saying, I think that's exactly it. You know, I mean, I like to equate this to like building a hot rod, kind of like going to the gym. You know, where you get these guys that don't even want to go to the gym. It's like you would say, I don't even want to go into the gym unless I can bench press 350 pounds, right? Which is ridiculous, right? You don't get there unless you go every day and build up to it. And that's how it is with these hot rods. So I'd say to Andre, man, I think, hey, do I want to do it for you? Yeah, there's an old song, if you got the money, I got the time, sure, but that's not how I do business normally. But I would say, man, just don't try to make it perfect in that show car with the twin turbo that everybody dreams about or you see on TV. Man, just get it going and get out there and drive it.
And you know, Andre, I remember that car. It was a blue car, and I didn't realize it was an SS car, but that in alone adds a lot of value to the project. Yeah. And anyway, a lot what Joe said is true. Most of what he said, everything he said was true about getting with it. But the biggest satisfaction is going to come from you doing it yourself. Not necessarily every last little nut and bolt. I can take pride in that. This car behind me, every last nut and bolt came from my hands, was put together. There's a lot of pride in that. And look at your old car, get out there, if anything, get your power washer out there and muck the whole thing out. Then you start looking at what you need to do. And like I said before, get excited about it. Get out there and do a little bit. If you got the drivetrain, there's no disrespect in if you have to take the engine into a reputable shop, somebody that will produce and somebody that will give you a fair amount of work for your money, and have them rebuild that engine. If you don't have the ability, or if you don't have the tools, the equipment, there's no pride lost there. Have somebody do that for you. I still have my transmissions rebuilt. I'll probably be trying to do them myself here, but we'll see how that goes. But anyway, the main thing is get her done, get it going. Do what you can on the car, make it look as good as you can, and then drive it. You'll enjoy it, and you'll have a lot of pride in that car.
Yeah, that's true, and it's fun. It's more fun that way, I think. So, yeah, that's good. Hey, you have to send me a picture of that car, Andre. I'd love to see what it looks like now. All right, next question. 73 LS Vega writes, what cars are in the back of the shop, and what are your future projects? So I'll start on that one, because literally I have a car in the back of your shop. It's actually a truck, 49 Chevy pickup. It's on one of the older videos back there. I'll try to put a link up to it. That's waiting in the wings. It's waiting for me to just drag it home and work on that. So that's one that I've got sitting back, waiting in the back of the shop. What about you, Dad? What are your future projects?
Talking about that truck you have back there, that truck's got a lot of potential. The top's already, it's got a very nice chop job on the top. The top's been lowered, I believe it's been lowered about 4 inches. It looks very correct in my eyes, and there's so much potential there. It's just a matter, he's just going to have to completely take it apart, of course, do every nut and bolt. But once again, you know, when you're done, there's a lot of pride there, and you can be proud of a project like that. Yeah. As far as me having stuff to do already, I'll tell you what, I'm loaded up. I don't take on any stuff anymore, because there's too much stuff I want to do for myself now. But I'm not sure, maybe Joe would like to just pan that camera, give it a quick pan around.
Yeah, I can do that.
And you'll see where I need to go here very soon.
You guys will see this video either right before or right after this one comes out of this next project. There you go.
Anyway, the thing, you know, that's the thing about most of these hot rods. When you first start out, they look kind of dorky. They don't look like a hot rod. Well, that's the whole idea. We're talking about a total transformation. I'm not sure how far I want to go with this, but I've got my work cut out for me. We'll be a while here.
You guys will have to tell us what you think about that truck. If you don't see the other video, just look for it coming out. Yeah, you'll have to get a look at it and put some comments, because I love hearing what you guys think should be done too. So that's pretty good. What other cars we got hidden out? Well, we got more project cars. Dan's got his Nova parked out there. He needs to get that thing going. It's 63 or 4, 64 Nova. Yeah, that's there. Most of these are up and running in here.
There's a 57 pickup out here.
Yeah, I bet you can get a good deal on that if the guy wanted to.
Yeah, maybe anybody that might need a big flower bed or whatever.
It's got a little rust, a little bit.
It'd be pretty handy for that.
All right, let's. These are a couple of good questions here, Dad, that I'm gonna get into. Wayne, if you haven't checked out his channel, Wayne's Work Blog, he does a lot of Jeep stuff, but he wrote in here, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood? So I'll skip that question. We'll come back to that another day.
Wait a minute, we might want to answer that one.
I don't have anything good for that one,
Well,
but he does have another question on there.
okay, go ahead.
Okay, he says, no, for real, how much do you have invested cash in the Model A? Just a guesstimate. And so I've been thinking on that a little bit, but before I answer that, I want you to think, Dad, looking back on the projects you built, if a guy takes a project like maybe this 34 Chevy pickup here and says, I want to just turn this into a hot rod I can drive, how much cash in today's money is a guy going to put out just to make it happen?
Well, you know, your normal run-of-the-mill type hot rodder, with all due respect, will they'll usually just throw a great big old number out there off the cuff. You know, a lot of them, and there are guys out there that do just throw a lot of money at these things. A lot of it is there's a lot of the work they don't want to do themselves or don't have the ability to do, and so yes, it costs more. I take pride in saving a buck when I'm building them, and a lot of that pride comes in the fact that I know I can work hard and I know I can do a very good job. For instance, I built like a complete frame, front to back, top to bottom, welded all together, and it went up underneath a rig that would run well over 100 miles an hour, well proven, worked right, everything. I mean, it'd go down the road straight, never had any problems. So, but I did all that myself just because I didn't have the money to go pay $14,000 for, say, a chassis. I've gotten to the point now in my life where, you know, sometimes there's a time restraint, and you know, you want to get the project done, yes. Look at your finances and see where that will take you. When I started the 32 here, I really had to bite hard on what I wanted to do with a frame. I could have put a frame under it that wouldn't have been correct. It might have not been right. It may have not looked just right. I'm sure I could have built a plenty stout enough frame and that would be well engineered and work well. But I didn't want to rob the car of its value, so I did buck up. I bought a frame, and it was a brand new frame, and I had it shipped out here.
A correct 32 Ford frame, that's right. The key to it.
And a 32 Ford frame is one of the most distinguishable frames out there. It has to be correct. It has, for instance, the reveals on the side that they only belong to a 32. And any guy that knows 32s could walk up to that car and they can tell that's the correct frame. And this frame was built way beyond any stock specs. The cross members, everything were put in there. It's got tubular cross members that are well engineered, and it's built right. And I knew I was going to put some decent power in it, so there was some money spent there, yes. But it's just like building a house. If you don't have a good foundation under that house, the whole rest of the thing could possibly crumble. It won't work for you. Yeah. Spend the money where you have to spend it. If I can keep, I don't even call it a high-end hot rod. I call it kind of a middle-of-the-road hot rod. But if I could keep the costs in anywhere, if you can stay under $20,000, by the time you get in the car and start it and drive it,
Yeah.
you're doing exceptionally well. But a lot of that is because you're doing most of the work yourself. I once assembled a hot rod, and I like to use new hardware, bolts and all. A lot of people use the old stuff over. Yes, if you have it and if it's in good shape, but in most cases, in a hot rod, I've actually invested a little over $1,000 in nuts and bolts alone for a hot rod, which isn't any big thing anymore.
It's not hard to do.
But yes, spend the money in the right places. I still think a car can be, or a truck in a hot rod, if you don't get too crazy, if you watch your costs, watch your expenses, I still think you could build one for $12,000. Back in the day, I was putting them together for $6,000 and $7,000, but they were worth every penny of that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and that kind of is where I'm thinking, like when he asked about, you know, how much I have in my Model A, I'll tell you some of the methodology behind it, how I came up with this, is I built a hot rod a few years back, and I sold it for 10 grand. And I put that money away for hot rod money. And while I was overseas, I bought that Model A. And honestly, I don't even remember how much it cost, how much we paid for it. Do you remember how much we paid for that? Because you guys picked it up for me.
I think it was in the, like 38 or 30.
I think I wanted to say 3,800. Maybe you wanted 4. We paid 38 for it or something.
Right in that neighborhood.
So, and that came right off the top out of that 10 grand. And so I'll tell you where I sit now is I've got just a few $100 left of that, and that's where I sit with my Model A. Now, that includes what adds up is if you look at that car, you look at it and you go, well, what costs money on it, right? It doesn't look like too much, but when you start adding stuff up, there's things you just can't get around. You know, putting tires on a car, you know, that costs.
The wheels
and tires cost, you know, a bunch of money.
If you build an engine that's going to last, you're going to have a little investment there too.
Right.
Even a small block Chevy in these days. We were joking earlier today about what I spent for a set of valve covers for this Hemi. And I mentioned to Joe, heck, I used to build a small block Chevy complete for that much money.
Yeah.
Now you buy a nice set of valve covers with that much.
It adds up, but there's ways you can get around it smarter too. Like I paid $300 for the engine in my Model A. It was used. It's a 350 small block Chevy. First off, if a guy wants to save a few bucks, go with something common. You know, a Hemi's going to cost you a lot more just to keep and maintain and put parts on than a small block Chevy. Even though, you know, people might turn their nose up at the 350 as, oh, that's too common, but hey, it works for me.
And it's reliable as the day is long.
Absolutely. So I paid $300 for that engine and I just re-ringed it, new rings and bearings in it, and did all the assembly myself. But even then, I'm buying rings, bearings,
camshaft,
put a camshaft in it, timing set, you know, and pretty soon that stuff adds up. Before you know it, a guy will have $1 grand wrapped up in just parts and stuff for his engine.
You know, 2,000, I think 2,000 is not unreasonable to tie up like in a small block Chevy, but you'll end up with a pretty reliable engine. If you don't get too crazy on a set of heads, but something that's very reliable, and you can look around and you can just about get some crate motors for that kind of money.
You absolutely can. You absolutely can.
Yeah.
If, you know, if a guy just wants to get a car going, you can pick up a crate motor for less than $2 grand.
Well, that, and then we find a reputable rebuilder that does transmissions, and once a year when we're at a particular swap meet, there's a regular transmission rebuilder there, and he'll have the whole array of different kinds of transmissions, and I think it's a pretty good deal that you can walk up there and buy one ready to go with a converter. All you got to do is bring it home, fill it with fluid, and install it and fill it with fluid, and you're off and running.
Yeah. And what's that guy want for him? $400, I think.
I think that's around the neighborhood of what they run now.
I bought one a few years ago, and I think that's what I paid for it. This past year, I think the guy was there, and still the same thing, about 400 for a turbo 350.
Yeah.
Which
And
again,
that's about the most
yeah.
reasonable one you're gonna find out there.
yeah, you know, yeah, so that's kind of that kind of gets into the methodology of building hot rods. And to be honest, I enjoy all of it. You know, some people might not, but that's part of the fun is when we roll up to a swap meet with a pickup load of junk, not junk, but parts that we've had collected or maybe took off a car we're not going to use, set it out there, and when you leave with $500 or $600 in your pocket, from selling some of that stuff that would have just piled up behind the garage,
Well, and what's nice about that too is you're getting a return on some old parts. You have parts that you're going to discard that you can't use because they're not what's going to go into your project.
Yeah.
And some stuff like, for instance, just today we were given some body parts, and if it's stuff that we can't use, off to the swap meet, turn that into green cash, and usually we'll leave the swap meet with another half a load.
Yeah, with parts for the next project or the current one, yeah.
And you can go to the swap meet and you can get some really good deals there, and I'm not above using some swap meet prices, swap meet priced parts on my hot rods. Of course, I look at them really close and make sure that everything's in good shape. Yes, I do put a lot of new parts in these cars, but that's where that money I made at the swap meet, of course, is funneled toward too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's a good question, and probably not one you're going to get guys to answer honestly very often. When you start actually getting guys about how much money they got in their hot rods, either they don't know or they are ashamed to admit it. But yeah, that's where we're at. It takes some money, but it takes work, time too.
And you have to be careful too on that initial expenditure. When you find a project you want to use, you got to buy them right. You can't go and throw a whole bunch of money at it initially right off the bat.
Yeah.
And all it does is it'll create a nervous time for you, because you'll drag it home, it'll sit for a few days, and you'll wonder, did I overspend, and am I ever going to do anything with this? Well, try to keep that initial prices within reason. Keep it down. Once in a while, yeah, you'll have to buck up and pay the price for something you really want. But like a buddy just told me here a couple days ago, he said, I told him I just bought a truck and it's old. He said, well, they're not making them anymore. Think about that.
That's right. That's right. Let's do a couple more questions here. Rusty Rods put on my YouTube channel. He said, how about some history, some background on how you guys got started, essentially. So, Dad, I'll kick that over to you. I'll let you answer that because I think that's fun. Where did you get started with hot rods? And then maybe where did you first start drag racing? Like, what was the first car that you took to the drag strip and ran, and when?
Well, I first started getting interested just from the people I was around when I was real young. Heck, since I was 12 years old, I had older brothers, and they would bring their buddies around, and they always had some old beaters. That was back in the day of the $50, $75 car. $100 car was a pretty good car. Anyway, fortunately, when I got up in the age of 16, legal driving age, there was still some of those cars around that were maybe $125, but it was stuff that would go down the road. And of course, you drag them in and play with them and make them better. And I was always looking to try to make them better. I'd scratch every penny I could, try to take what jobs I could. I lived in a little town that there just wasn't a whole bunch of money around, but there was a bunch of old junk around, so you could figure out a way to get some of that. for instance, I got my hands on a 55 Chevy, and this would have been back in about 1970, 71. And it was a hardtop car. It could have been a nice car. I just wanted to make a hot rod. So I had a Pontiac motor that I had rebuilt, a 389 Pontiac, and I scrounged all the hot parts I could for it. I still remember I had an old Iskandarian camshaft I put in it. Of course, I had the big AFB 4-barrel, and I had a few other things I did to it. And of course, I just made sure the basic running of it was right. And I put all that in the 55 Chevy with a hydromatic, and somebody should have stopped me somewhere along the way, because I think that thing was faster than it should have been, and it wasn't a safe car. But that got me by until I started experimenting with. I put a little bit of alcohol in the gas tank, and I got the mix a little bit off, and I took it out for a test drive there one day, and of course it got up some RPM, and all of a sudden it made some weird noises and shut down. Well, I ended up having to pry the heads off of it. When I looked down one hole, the only thing that was down that hole after I got the head off was the rod with a piston pin. There was no piston left in the hole. Of course, I found all the fragments in the oil pan, but I finally figured out years later that I'd leaned her out a little too much with just a little too much alcohol in that gasoline, and but you know, that's how you learn. That's your tuition, I guess.
That's funny.
Anyway, it evolved, and things got better. I got a little better education on the mechanical end of it, and I was always around it all of my life. As a matter of fact, that was my professional job. I worked in a big diesel shop, and on, of course, big mining equipment. And anyway, so I always played with the hot rods, and then you get to one of the first cars I took to the drag strip, and you know, that's been a while back. The main thing I could remember is I did get a Vega, and it was one of the first ones, like a 72 Vega, and I decided it needed, of course, from one end to the other, work done. It ended up with a small block Chevy, tunnel ram on it, and I took it down to the track, and it wasn't, by today's speed means, it wasn't fast, but it was fast enough for me.
So that was the first car you actually started racing, and then...
Yeah, I believe so, but from there it went pretty quick.
On the drag strip, anyway.
Right.
There's probably some racing that happened earlier.
Yeah, legally, but...
I know there was.
You know, I was like a lot of people, a lot of guys that really wanted to get to the drag strip. You were always afraid that they weren't even going to let you race because your car wasn't up to snuff. But after I got there and of course went through tech a couple of times, I learned everything that they wanted to see, you know, and then I began to realize that this is all for my own good. You know, we're talking some safety equipment, and make sure the car goes, but it also stops and steers okay. And it wasn't long before I was going well over 100 miles an hour in the quarter mile, and I could do it safely.
Well, talk about some of that safety equipment. I know you've told me stories before about the with your dragster, your front engine dragster, when you and old Morty were running that, and some of the stuff you went through when you first started racing that thing.
Well, we were sure. I was kind of green with that because it was just an all-out front motor dragster, but you know, I didn't have any big power to put in it, so I built a small block Chevy, and with of course some really good some good internals, so it would run. It would, I could turn that motor 7,500 every pass in every gear, and it stayed together real well. And anyway, we got it to the track, and it wasn't, back then it wasn't tough to make one pass and qualify and be in the program. And we just had a lot of fun doing that. My old friend, Morty, he kind of would tag along, and he enjoyed every bit of it, and he was just a bundle of good time to be, you know, to have him around. Technically, he was good. We'd discuss things and see what we needed to do and all, and of course I was just learning too. So we really had a good time. So I tagged him with the name of my crew. I called him my crew chief, and he just jumped right in and took that role. And he was the kind of guy that he was a great guy around small crowds, but when we got to the track, this guy was as professional as they came. This guy would get out there, and if anybody tried to give us a hard time or tried to, you know, downrate us a little bit or give us a back seat, he'd say, no, that pit's not good enough for us. Put us over there on the pavement. We don't want to be out here in the dirt working on our stuff. Anyway, and they'd look at him, and I mean, he actually demanded some respect. So they would just move us right on over there and put us right where we wanted to be, and it worked out great. He was a good representative to have on the team, the crew chief, Morty.
Well, tell him about when he invented the moonwalk, Dad. I like that story.
Well,
we're talking what, the early 70s, mid 70s maybe?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
This is way, well, it wasn't way before Michael Jackson, but
it was before he was doing the moonwalk.
It was before the moonwalk. Anyway, Morty always dressed kind of classy anyway, you know. He'd show up. We were racing this time at the Winter Nationals at Beeline, which was just outside of Phoenix there, and it was a well-known track. We were there for the Winter Nationals in 1978. So anyway, we got the car there, we unloaded, and Morty, he was more like he would stand around, he was like a representative, ready to answer any of the questions, any of the tech guys that show up there, or any of the track people, and he had the answer for them. Well, anyway, onto this moonwalk thing. Well, I would get in the staging lanes and all, and I had my cousin Manuel, who was really a bunch of help too, and he was like my number one help there with the car, and which, by the way, he was an excellent driver. He was a small guy. This guy had reflexes like a cat. He could cut some lights, and I think to this day, had I not bucked all the money out for that car, I should have let him drive. But anyway, back to Morty. I'd get in the car. They'd push me up to the line, and then we'd fire the car, and I'd roll on up through the water. And of course, you always want to get on the other side of the water before you put your foot in it. And I'd do my burnout. Anyway, I'd light them up and do the burnout, and then bring her to a stop. Well, Morty was ready, and he would walk out on the track in front of me. Anyway, this was the Winter Nationals. They'd put a lot of the VHT down, and I mean, that track was sticky. And I did the burnout, and I rolled out there, and I mean, there was cars that were much more powerful than mine that would continue to burn on out. So that track was just sticky, all probably halfway down. So when Morty, I'm in the car, and I'm all ready to go, so of course I had reverse, and I get ready to back up. Well, Morty's walking across in front, right out onto that sticky surface to guide me back. Anyway, he always wore these kind of a fancy shoe that they kind of slipped on. You know, you didn't tie them on. But I'm sitting there and I'm waiting for his signal, so he walks out across and he's just leisurely walking out there across that track. And as he stepped down, I noticed the step before that some of that stickiness of the track was coming up with his shoe, like it almost like bubble gum on the track. It was so sticky. Well, in one of those steps, he stepped right out of his shoe in front of me. And I'm sitting in that car and it's rumbling, and I thought, oh no, what's he gonna, well, he did that reverse moonwalk step right back into that shoe, and then he just, like he hardly missed a step. But when he turned around, he had a big smile on his face because he knew I was watching, and by then I couldn't hardly contain. I was trying to be serious and hang on to that car, and I wanted to laugh so bad, but then of course he started directing me, and here he comes, you know, and he's walking me back, and he lined me up and walked off the track. And well, anyway, I was still thinking about that when I made it through the end there, and I pulled the chute. But anyway, that was something I will never forget, that sight.
Morty inventing the moonwalk. That's good.
But he took that step back, and I mean, he did not miss a beat. I mean, he slid right back into that shoe and then continued on walking out. But I'm sure he had those toes curled up, hanging onto those shoes pretty good.
That's funny. That's funny. That was a good question. Some good memories with that one. Let's see here. I had another question here, and I'm trying to find it. Not related to the hot rods though. I can't find it on there right now, but I'll tell you, it was a guy wrote in there, and it's a guy we know, in fact, asked. He said, has your dad ever taught the trade of building bows to anybody, or is that just something he's done? And so I thought, you know what, I wasn't even going to mention that because this is hot rods, right? But I thought that's a cool question to ask.
There's probably plenty of people out there that don't realize that I do build the old style longbows, like used in Agincourt. Not that old a style. Mine are of course an updated version, but I hand make these bows, and I built quite a few. I have them scattered across the United States and in a few foreign countries. Anyway, that's a good question. I have had my other son Dan in the workshop with me, and yes, he has actually built a couple himself as I instructed him, and I know he's very capable of it. He could use, it's like anything else though, you have to practice it, and if you practice it practically on a daily basis, that's when you'll make a good product. I don't spend as much time as I used to in there. I have had in the past a lot of people ask about coming in for lessons, and it hasn't worked for me. I can't, I don't really, when I get in there, I want to build bows. I want to build bows that I sell, or I put them in the store, people will look at them and they'll buy them from there. Anyway, no, I haven't actually ever set up in a classroom type situation. I'd love to be able to teach some of my grandkids or some of the people close around me, because hey, when I'm gone, if I'm gone, my bows will be gone too. I hope Dan can carry some of that tradition on. I was hoping that, and I'm sure that it's not that tough a thing to do. I would like for Joe and any of my other sons to pick it up and carry on with it, even if they don't have to do a whole lot of it, at least learn how to do it.
I'd like that too. I think that'd be good. Hopefully next year about this time I'll have a little more free time on my hands where I can do that. So that's good. I wanted to ask that question because it kind of, you know, to bring it back to the hot rods, you know, the question we asked before was about history and what got us into this. And you talked initially about how growing up you were surrounded by it, you know, and that's how you learned. And I look back on my life, and it was the same way. In fact, in high school, I never took auto shop, never took the shop class or anything, but just because it didn't work out for my schedule or whatnot. But I didn't make it a priority either. I was just surrounded by it, you know. It's what we did. That's what we had. We had in our carport there in our driveway. We always had some old hot rods sitting there. We were always working on them. Part of it was out of necessity, you know, trying to keep some junk running to get us to school or whatnot. But a lot of it was just what we did for fun, and I very much appreciated that. Not just from you, Dad, but also from Mom. I'll tell one story about a hot rod that Mom's involved in that I think is funny. I had just put, let's see, I had my Nova, my 73 Nova, which if I can find a good picture, I'll put a picture here where we can see it. But I got my Nova going, and we put a new rear end under it. Remember, it had a 12 bolt with it was a racing setup that we just we replaced it with a 9-inch. And so I couldn't wait to go out and try it out one night. But I remember my dad was working graveyard that night, working the night shift. So he was at work, and so it was kind of late. And I thought, well, I'm going to go out and try it anyway. So I took the car out of town a few miles to a good straightaway there, and I was by myself. And I thought, well, I'm going to line up and give it a launch and see how this rear end holds up. And and it didn't. It didn't. I launched it, and I just remember hearing a bunch of banging in the back, and the engine wound up. So I backed out of it, shifted to neutral, and coasted to the side of the road, and shut it off because I didn't know what broke. You know, as I was slowing down, coasting, I could hear it. You know, it was going thump 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 thump. And, oh man, something with my driveline. So I grabbed my flashlight, and it's out in the desert, and it was, you know, pitch black, and I stepped out of the car and shined my light down the road to see if I'd left any parts, and sure enough, my driveline was laying in the road back there. So I looked under the car, and the rear end, remember we'd used square tube perches for it, and it just rolled that square tube. It just rolled it.
Smashed it.
It got good bite, I guess. So anyway, so I was stuck out there, so I grabbed the driveline and threw it in the car, and was sitting there wondering what to do. And a little while later, a car came by, and so the guy picked me up and rode me into town. And I didn't know if I was going to be in trouble or not, but I walked into my house, and my mom was up. It was pretty late. I think she was waiting for me to come home. And she said, "Oh, I didn't hear your car pull in." I said, "I didn't." And she said, "Uh-oh, what happened?" I go, "Well, it's a few miles out of town." And so she goes, "Well, what happened to it?" And I told her, "Well, I thought I wanted to try it, and I launched it, and man, it just rolled the rear end, broke the U-joint, tossed the driveline." And I looked at her like I didn't know what she was going to say, and she started laughing. And she said, "You know, right after your dad and I first got married, he did that same thing in his Camaro at the corner in Prescott, Arizona."
Right downtown Whiskey Row, right up the light.
Oh,
Of course,
man.
I had some guy that, I wasn't from Prescott, but I knew a lot of the hot rodders around there, and I had one of my old hot rod buddies rolled up next to me, and he wound his up, so I just had to wind it up. We're both watching the light, and when I unloaded it, it unloaded.
Unloaded the driveline.
And my wife was sitting over there in the other seat, and yeah, I can see where she remembered that.
She just laughed, I remembered, but was a good sport because we threw the tow strap in the minivan, drove out of town, and I hooked up, and she towed me back into town that night. So that was pretty good. I appreciate you guys both supporting this this hobby. So let me see. Well, I think we're about far enough into this one, Dad. And as we're telling these stories, I realized, man, I got so many more stories to tell.
Yeah,
I don't want to share, but maybe, you know, like a steering wheel coming off and stuff. I'll tell that story just because we're on a tow strap. I don't even think I was 16 yet, and a guy in high school had an older brother who was selling a Camaro for $300, and so I happened to have $300, and so we made this deal. And I remember coming home and telling my dad, and he said, "All right, well, let's go." And so we went over to the other side of town, and this was back, you know, in the town. We could just hook up the tow strap and drag it home. Anyway, I get in this 69 Camaro, and I'm driving it as my dad's pulling me with his Land Cruiser, and we got to the main intersection in town, the one big stop sign where had to make a 90-degree left. And I just remember we started off and my dad's pulling me, and I went to scoot forward in my seat like this. Well, the steering wheel came off. And I just remember my dad looking back out the window at me because he was turning left and I was going straight. And it was only a matter of seconds before the slack was going to end up in that. And he looked at me and I just held the steering wheel up like this. And then boom, that tow strap caught, man, and we got it all out of, finally got it to the side of the road and stopped. And I stuffed that steering wheel back on. But man, we got all kinds of stories like that.
That was crazy.
Yeah, that was crazy. Well, you got anything else here, Dad? I was thinking about wrapping up. We're about 45 minutes into this. So.
Yeah. No, there is a lot of stories. You might remind me next time to tell the one about the truck that Morty bought, that I helped him go pick it up, and we were towing it over to his place, and he had that thing sold before we could get to his place. That's how good he was. Anyway, that's for another time. I'll tell the whole story. We'll save that one for the next one. Hey, you guys, if there's any, those of you who know us, if you want to hear a story, you want to hear it told again, you heard about a story one time and you want to get the facts. I don't know about the facts. We don't let facts get in the way of too many good stories. But put down in the comments what you want to hear. We'd love to hear from you guys. I just sure appreciate you guys following along. I know you get something out of this. It means the world to me, though, being able to sit down and tell these stories. So. Well, I enjoy every minute of it. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Take care.